Hey everyone, and welcome to Startup Savants, a podcast dedicated to helping aspiring entrepreneurs and startup enthusiasts by bringing you news, insights, and stories about the startups and founders that are making waves right now. I'm your host, Ethan.
And I'm your other host, Annaka.
Our guest today is Kaylin Marcotte, founder of JIGGY. Kaylin is a former employee of theSkimm. In fact, she was employee number 1. Kaylin turned her favorite hobby into the fast-growing, mission-driven jigsaw puzzle startup, JIGGY. Hey, Kaylin. Happy to have you here.
Hey, thanks, guys. Happy to be here.
All right. Tell us a little bit about the history behind JIGGY, its mission, and how you got started.
Yeah. My journey with jigsaw puzzles began like 2014. As you mentioned, I was the first employee at theSkimm. So that was my first entry into the startup world, startup life, living that grind in the early days. And it was an incredible experience, but definitely, stressful and all consuming. And I was on screens all day long. And so I was looking for a way to unwind and unplug. And, it was 2014, 15. We were starting to have these conversations around burnout and kind of tech fatigue. And I wanted to get away from screens and do something with my hands. And I rediscovered my love of puzzles, which, I'd done as a kid, but not for 15 or so years. And I did one. It clicked immediately. And I started doing about 1,000-piece puzzle every week. And so was constantly looking for more, buying more, going to toy stores online. And all the ones I could find were just, I felt really outdated and kind of cheesy, grandma's puzzles, stock photography, the same cardboard box. And the idea planted then of just what would it look like if I kind of made my dream puzzle, and what parts of the puzzle experience would I want to innovate on and kind of take my approach to. And so ended up being at theSkimm for 4 years. So this was definitely a kind of a slow burn of an idea, kept coming back to me, kept taking more and more shape. And ultimately what came together and what I ended up launching with in 2019 is JIGGY. And we partner with emerging female artists and turn their artwork into the puzzle designs. So that was kind of pain point number 1 of just the design itself that you're spending 8, 10, 12 hours with, living inside of, putting together piece by piece. And part 2 is, what do you do with the puzzle once you're done? And for me, I was pretty, sentimental of these hours I had just spent. I didn't want to tear it apart right away. And so we include puzzle glue with each JIGGY so that you can preserve it once you're done buying the pieces, and preserve it, display it as wall art. So our mission is to get people away from screens, kind of reconnecting with downtime, mindfulness, and then supporting our artist partners who we do profit sharing with and get a percentage of every sale.
I think a lot of people maybe have been looking for this outlet, especially tech fatigue. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And maybe there's a big chunk that have that relationship with puzzles from their childhood or from being younger and all that stuff. So I got really excited when it was like, all right, we're going to talk to Kaylin with JIGGY. And I was like, yes, super excited. But this was your first experience in manufacturing and logistics surrounding that. How did you kind of develop this new skill set, and what were the roadblocks?
Yeah, steep learning curve there. Obviously, there were some very transferable things from the SKIM experience, but JIGGY being my first physical product and the whole world of supply chain, manufacturing, fulfillment, customer service in that way was brand new. And not only was it brand new to me, it was also, from 4 months in, a constantly moving target, because we launched November 2019. So, 3-4 months later, the COVID just shook, as many of us know and have felt the impacts of this supply chain world, and sourcing products, freight, everything just got more complicated and more expensive. So, it was bootstrapping. So trying to do everything in the scrappiest way possible, for the first or second time ever, brought a ton of challenges. I think once we had our core manufacturing partner, which was its own process, and I think there's actually a ton of opportunity in finding factories. How do you match people with ideas with people who can make it? I kind of naively thought like there must be some index or like a directory and you just, Google puzzles, like who makes these? Let's Google it. And it ended up being much more challenging especially since so much of our product is custom, to find someone able and willing to take that bet on us, pre-revenue, pre-launch, like it's their investment too, to even like fire up the machines for you.
Right.
So that was, really much more of a partnership than I think I had previously expected. And then again, doing every piece of our packaging fully custom. The pieces come in a reusable glass jar with a cork lid. We include the puzzle glue that's not, marketed as puzzle glue. We didn't want to use plastic, so it comes in an aluminum tube, which was apparently for hair cream, which is a thing. So kind of just piecemealing each aspect of the packaging together was, almost a year-long process. During that time, kind of parallel path with curating the art, figuring out that relationship with the artists, these royalties, how do we support them and help really monetize their work. And then the tech side and the website and building that out. So kind of those were the three processes I did for about a year before launching. And then started out of my living room fulfilling and had my little station of packing orders and stuff. But very quickly, especially with the dimensions of our product, I think it was a blessing. I had a friend who did a jewelry business, and I think because it was so compact, it actually like kind of enabled her to do it much longer. Our, kind of silver lining of each master carton only has 6 puzzles, and they were already stacked, and there were only 100 of them, so it didn't last long doing it in my living room. And so we got a third-party logistics partner who handles all fulfillment.
Nice.
And kind of been off to the races ever since then.
Yeah. I would love to talk about packaging real quick, because the packaging that y'all have is very different from traditional what you'd know as like puzzle packaging. So, I mean, I appreciate switching lanes on that one, but what kind of drove you to make that change?
Yeah, it stemmed from a couple different approaches. One was that I really wanted it to feel like a more elevated kind of premium product. From the beginning, I kind of wanted to reposition puzzles out of kind of toy and games aisle and more into like home gift, lifestyle. And so I wanted the packaging to reflect that, because each of the puzzle designs was original artwork by these female artists. I also wanted the packaging to kind of reflect, like be worthy of showcasing their art. And so kind of took inspiration from like very minimalist, museum or gallery, kind of white. The box sits upright. So it's a square base and then sits upright, almost like kind of pedestal-ish. And then it's thick white, has some gold foil that's meant to kind of evoke like a frame. And then the image of the puzzle is displayed there. We say puzzles worth framing, and also art in pieces is kind of some of our brand language. So that's on the packaging. And then inside you have the reusable glass jar. So I wanted something that, one, if you do the puzzle and glue it and frame it, like you have this, piece of your Jiggy experience that you can reuse. We've seen people use them as flower vases, cookie jars. There was one time during the first kind of COVID lockdown when somebody used it as their sourdough starter, container.
perfect.
And I was like, these COVID pandemic trends merging.
Yeah.
But, or if you choose not to glue your puzzle, to put the pieces back in there and have it almost be able to stand alone, like on a bookshelf, and kind of look decorative. And then the glue, obviously, each package comes in an aluminum tube. And then really during the kind of product ideation was trying to figure out what to include to apply the glue. And I had tried different things, and I thought maybe like a tiny paintbrush or something, but that left like marks, streaks. So maybe a mini like paint roller, and that didn't work for other reasons. And so finally I was on like Reddit, and some guy, Randy, who glues all his puzzles, posted a video of him doing it, and he just like dumped glue out and used it was either his credit card or his driver's license, and just spread it. And I was like, I guess that's all you need. And it's just like a straight edge tool that just like, gets it closely spread in between the cracks of the pieces. So we developed this glue spreader, which is in kind of our signature shape and has our logo cut out, and looks kind of decorative as well.
Well, thank you, Randy from Reddit. That's awesome.
Yeah, right.
I'm imagining the mini paint roller, and that's adorable. But I can understand Randy pulled through on that one.
So we know you work with upcoming artists and lots of awesome people to put together the artwork for the puzzles. We'd love to hear a little bit more about the relationships with those artists and how you find and decide to work with an artist, and whether or not anybody can submit their art to Jiggy.
Yeah, it's honestly my favorite, and kind of the aspect of the business that really keeps me going when I run out of energy. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and my mother worked in arts education my entire life. And so I was always surrounded by the art community there. And I really saw how even if you have made it, if you will, and have gallery representation or are participating in exhibits, now, of course, like Instagram, building a following, it's still so hard to actually monetize your work. And I think artists oftentimes, just copyright, and especially with social media and sharing, it's hard to really, correctly credit and pay artists for their work. So wanted to make sure from the beginning we had that really baked into the business model. And I just started going to fairs and shows, based in New York. So plenty of opportunities to kind of scout new artists. And I really approached it from both, what would look good, just completed and finished and something you'd want to frame on the wall, and also what would make for a really fun puzzle experience, certainly like detail and color and saturation and layers. And so I just started with that lens in mind, going to shows and fairs, and found the first 6 artists we worked with for our launch collection. Myself reached out to them, wasn't really sure if they would think it's like silly or just like not an application of their work, they were interested in. But actually it was a great reception. I think they were open to kind of seeing what the experience would be like with people then, puzzling their work. And I think something I didn't necessarily expect, but has become a really special aspect, is that relationship between the customer puzzler and the artist, where, you have studied every detail of their work, like truly. And so there's such an appreciation, for the work and for the detail, and kind of this intimacy, because you kind of feel a bit of like ownership in having recreated it also. So like you feel like part of the creative process with the artist, and tag each other on social, and they'll discover an artist through the puzzle and then go on their site and buy their other work. So that's been a really, really kind of special thing to watch happen. For us, that was pre-launch. I was just always had my eyes open, scouring. And now that we have had some visibility, we have a lot of inbound. So we have basically like an open submission process, and any artist can submit their work. We now have a few different like use cases, which is great. Some are just our curated collections, which we do seasonally, but we've also started working with partners and brands and doing custom puzzles or collaborations. So we'll pull from our artist community to commission an original for a brand that wants to do a custom puzzle. And actually our next collection that's launching this spring was the result of our first community art voting contest. And so artists, I think we had over 500 submit their work, and our community of puzzlers went through and voted for their favorites. And so that's awesome. Is the winners of that are our next collection launching soon.
So you've really got the community involved in this as well. That's really great.
Yeah. Especially for my SKIM experience, I'm a big believer of leading with community around your brand.
Right. So on to the kind of nuts and bolts of those relationships with the artists. How did you put together the licensing or copyright agreements with those artists? Did you kind of pull from a template that exists out there, or is this something that you had to really learn on your own as well?
Both. I definitely have taken the approach, especially, bootstrapping. Again, I started with $25,000 of my savings from the 8 years of working before launching. And so really tried to stretch a dollar and do as much as I could myself. So found, I don't know if it was like LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer or whatever, but found templates out there. And tried to just reach out to anybody I knew in my network who might have insight on not necessarily just the legal language, but also just industry norms, like what is standard, royalty rates, terms, and anything that I should, be mindful to, what artists really care about. In the beginning, we've now, as I mentioned, especially with brand partners, starting to do originals, but I, in the beginning, didn't, with kind of an unproven, untested market, didn't know what kind of sales to expect. Didn't want to ask artists to create new work if I couldn't, pay them up front for like a commission rate. And so we just pulled from their existing work. So there was no there was no work needed on their end. We pulled from existing portfolio, and they got paid out on royalties on a quarterly basis. So, trying to just be mindful of how it could be a win-win really for both. But yeah, the contract itself, we actually just, I think in the last 6 months had a real art licensing lawyer revamp it. But the first couple years was definitely scrappy, and a lot of hacking together templates and Google and
That's awesome. You made it work. That's what counts.
Yep.
Well, and copyright law is not easy. So
no,
at all.
No, I think people go to school for quite some time to be able to make things like that happen.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to jump around a little bit. So you were on Shark Tank, and I think
yes.
I think that people have heard of Shark Tank. So I want to talk about before you went to Shark Tank. What was the kind of preparation for that? What did that process look like for you?
It was a really good forcing function for me to have to do that homework and ask some of the big questions and be ready for the big questions. You know, again, bootstrapping and being a solo founder, I didn't really have anyone to like push back on me or like, you know, be accountable to. So the zooming out, especially when you're also a one-woman show and so in the weeds and kind of, you know, in the business versus working on the business.
Right.
I really appreciated the opportunity. You know, of course, I was like taking it very seriously and wanted to really walk out there feeling as prepared as I could. But it was also just really important, kind of zooming out and big picture strategy, that it's really hard to hold, you know, carve out time and hold yourself to do without such an impetus like that. So I, you know, I of course watched a ton of the show, and there are 5 questions like, you know, you're going to get. And then from there, you know, really tried to work backwards from like, what do I want the outcome to be? Or like, what do I want somebody watching to walk away knowing about the company and my story? And so I think you really, when you're out there and sharks are all talking over each other and bouncing, like as much as it's kind of, you know, just media training 101, but like how can you make sure that you're as much as you can controlling the conversation to communicate what you need to get across at the end of the day. So watched a ton of it, made sure like I knew, brought in, you know, the head of analytics at theSkimm, who was just a friend. And I was like, all right, what are my numbers? What's CAC to like help me here? So called in some favors for sure. Had a bunch of friends, you know, this was 2020. And so all Zoom, but get on Zoom and pretend to be the sharks and grill me and a bunch of practice sessions. And then ultimately, you know, I think because at that point I had 0 employees and had truly done everything myself, I was kind of like, there's nothing they can ask me that I don't know the answer to, because I've literally done everything.
You are intimately involved. Yes.
Right. So then just tried to kind of have fun with it.
That's cool. So we all see Shark Tank and we see these people making deals, and we see that, you know, there's a lot of publicity that comes from being on the show. Do you see it as more of an opportunity for funding, as an opportunity for a celebrity partnership? I'm going air quotes here. Is the benefit the appearance on the show? I mean, what, in your opinion, what's the major benefit of appearing on something as widely popular as Shark Tank?
I think it's both, and I think it really depends on the state of the business. And I think it's actually changed a lot certainly since the show began. I mean, if you watch the old seasons, like it was, I think the average deal was like 30% for 300,000. So like, you know, $1 million valuation. And it was real, like, you know, real kind of mom and pop. And that was maybe a great deal. And the funding and that exposure to having an advisor, like one of the sharks, like, really, you know, was the desired outcome. I think now you see a big mix, and they're like already VC backed, like real growth stage businesses also going on, for either like more strategic money. I think less than the numbers. They're looking for like the strategic money of a shark, and of course the exposure. I think, you know, just reaching the Shark Tank audience, you know, you reach consumers and people that hopefully will come and shop and, you know, stay in your ecosystem and become advocates, but also a lot of, you know, other investors watch the show. So people like spin it into a whole round and follow on investment. a lot of like large retail, so big wholesale accounts or collaboration. So I found personally a lot, just the straight, traffic and sales day of is like great and such a high, but a lot of kind of tangential exposure to different partners, retailers, wholesale, and, potential investors or acquirers.
So you're saying that not all money is equal?
Yes, I would say that.
So can you dive in a little more on what strategic money means to you?
Well, I think you see a lot on the show, like, and the sharks do it too. Like they try to picture where you would fit in within their portfolio. So you'll see like Mr. Wonderful being like, oh, this is a subscription business. I have a ton of subscription. Would this product pair with like my wine, my wine box club of the month, or the wedding industry. So Mark does a ton of like education stuff. So I think, Lori, of course, immediately she's like, if I can get you on QVC, like value add. So I think thinking of and really doing the research, if you're preparing for the show, of what do the existing portfolios look like? What are the natural advantages each of the sharks might have. People do this, certainly with outside of Shark Tank, with, larger companies or opportunities that position them uniquely in the market in some way. So I think there's, especially if you can get the same terms from multiple sources, then really kind of thinking about all of that, the value add that each might be able to provide.
Yeah, it just sounds to me like Shark Tank is like the ultimate pitch practice. Like you have to have it down together 100% before you're going to be on TV.
Definitely. I think
impressive.
The like one take and everything you say can and will be used against you kind of thing is, it definitely gets the adrenaline going.
Yeah, no kidding. What were your nerves like in that situation? I feel like I'd rather not.
Yeah. So the funny part is you walk it, and it looks exactly like you're standing outside and you hear the countdown and then the doors open and you walk down the hallway, but then you get into the tank and you hit your mark and you stand there in silence for like 30 to 60 seconds while they adjust the cameras and everything. And then from the side, someone just yells, go, and then you start. And so it's like, talk about a cold start. You're literally standing there trying to just like smile at them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm very impressed. I'd probably pass out. But switching to another aspect of your background, you started in law and then moved into working for theSkimm, where it sounds like you were kind of employee one. Can you tell us a bit about that background and that experience and how and if it influenced your choice to jump into entrepreneurship?
Definitely did. I was pre-law, I was paralegal, was studying for the LSAT, and then was doing management consulting while I was getting my applications together. And theSkimm really was just one of those time and place things that kind of totally derailed in a great way and just, hard right turn. So I was doing management consulting. I was kind of looking at the businesses I was working on there. And I was like, I really feel like what I'm missing is like a personal connection to whatever the service or product. Like, how fun would it be to work somewhere where I am a consumer of that? And so I had been subscribed to theSkimm very early on. They launched the newsletter in summer of 2012. And one of the co-founders and I had a mutual friend, and I think that's how she posted it, or somehow she shared it, and I got signed up, within the first 6 months. And so I had already been a reader of it, and I was a poli-sci major, undergrad, so just really connected with just the mission and like, you know, we were hearing at the time, like millennials are cord cutting and not reading the newspaper. And like, and I was like, it is like, how is my generation going to connect with the current events in the world around them? And so I was just so drawn to their mission, and then had a coffee date with Carly and Danielle and just talked about, you know, what the next couple of years and what their goals were. So joined as their first employee. And I absolutely think that seeing the inside of a startup so early really helped like demystify what it is and like what it takes. And, you know, I think from the outside, it's very easy to think, you know, everyone totally has it together. They have so many, you know, expertise or skill sets or things I don't have yet. How could I, you know, do that too? And so being in those rooms and in those conversations and really seeing like we're all winging it, and you know, sure, you bring what you know and you lead with, especially at theSkimm, kind of the values of like community and transparency, and we just throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And so I think it really helped give me the confidence that I could figure it out when I was ready. And just the people, I mean, they hired so well. So the people I was surrounded by, especially the first, you know, I think the first year we ended with 8 employees and then like 20 the next. So seeing it from 0, you know, seed stage to like 75, 80 when I left, which was like a year after the Series B. Those years were just like super meaty, you know, creative part of the company's history.
It's I feel like a lot of people outside of the startup world just think you snap your fingers and everyone knows exactly what you're doing. And we just talked to someone yesterday who's like, no, you approach every step like a little newborn. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're doing. And then you just sort of add skills as you come across them. So
absolutely. And I think I have a friend who kind of coined this term. She was an investor, and I think she actually did a TED Talk on this topic, but she coined like what she thinks the most important quality in a founder early team is not, she calls IQ, EQ, but AQ, which is your adaptability quotient. Wow. And I think that's so, I mean, I had been thinking about Jiggy for years, finally launched it 4 months later, global pandemic. Like you never, whether it's that dramatic or not, like you don't know, you know, what's going to be thrown at you and what the circumstances are. So I definitely think just adaptability is a really big kind of indicator. But there's a total like survivor bias. You're right. Of like, you know, of course that was going to work. That was always going to work. I'm like, no, I can definitely tell you there are times you doubt everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like once or twice every day.
Yeah. Constantly.
Yeah. Those highs and lows, like they're 5 minutes apart multiple times a day.
Oh, for sure.
And you've talked about work-life balance and what that means to you in your own experience. Can you tell us more about that? How do you find that balance, and why is it so important to you?
I've kind of come around to a different approach for me, which I think for a long time with work-life balance, I would try to have both like at the same time and have every day feel balanced or like every week feel balanced. And I don't know, I'm like a bit more of an extremes person. And so what actually works better for me is to not try to be a good founder at the same time that I'm good friend, daughter, girlfriend, sister. Like I kind of think it comes down to clear expectations. And so they're like, you know, especially like our peak Q4, I'm just like, you know, I'm going to carve out some time. Let's see when works. But like, honestly, most of the next 8 weeks, like I'm in a bit of a hole, probably not going to like respond to texts in a couple hours, you know? And so and it releases like the guilt of trying to be good at both at the same time. And so, but equally, when I carve out space, like I have no guilt about not checking my phone and not being responsive to emails right away. And so I think for me, I find it really hard to be half minded or half available. So I kind of have tried to flip it on its head and just not and do one thing well at a time. And then if the month feels overall balanced, like that feels like a win to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think something I've heard from peers and coworkers is that guilt thing. Like, oh, someone sent me a message at 8:00 and I didn't respond to it and I feel horrible about that. And it's like, you know, designating times to be at work or to be at home. I'm with you. I love a good work-life balance. Yes,
for sure.
Yeah. It is real. What measures do you take to then ensure that your team is balanced as well?
Yeah, we are just kind of starting to get into that. So I've had an amazing crew of part-timers, freelancers, kind of agency type support over the past 2 years. Jiggy's now 2.5 almost. And the last few months has been my first full timer. And so now we're a team of about 4 with some of that part-time support still. And so the last few months it's been a great exercise. And the first 2 years of Jiggy, like my experience kind of leadership wise was very product, you know, the business, the sales, marketing, all of that. And I haven't yet really had the, you know, other side of being a founder and CEO, which is the team and internal leadership and culture. So we're kind of actively still defining that and seeing what works and what's the right balance of, you know, everyone being aware and having eyes on everything and what are the potential bottlenecks or holdups, but, you know, not like micromanaging, especially it's only like 3 people still. So, and all remote and always have been remote. So yeah, kind of that's an open and very top of mind thing for me. But, you know, I'm open to all, you know, we text, call, Slack, email. And so if something is really, inhibiting anybody else's work, I try to prioritize that first. And I think just prioritization, getting super clear on, you know, each person's, what they're owning, how it all works together. And then prioritizing and making sure, like, you know, we get to what we can. I think I've come around and a lot of people, like I'm hearing and having more and more conversations around, like it can be both. It can be like interesting, important work and not kill yourself, stressful. I think for a while, this kind of hustle culture of like, if you're not suffering, you don't deserve it, you know? You haven't earned it if you're not miserable. And I feel like that's changing a lot, which I'm very happy to see. And I'm trying to bring that to my team too.
Yeah, Gary Vee has even cooled down quite a bit.
Yay, millennials, we can do this. But do you have any tips or advice for anyone who's having trouble striking that balance? Because I know quite a few people who will go for 80 hours and they're like, I'm dying, but I don't know how to do this differently.
Yeah, I've done like very, it feels a little silly doing it, but it ends up being insightful for me of like very intentional, like audits of my time. And I'll, you know, do almost like a lawyer tracks to 15 minutes of what their billables are. Like I'll really for a week, if I'm feeling off balance or like I'm spinning wheels and I'm like working hard, but like the same things are rolling over on the to-do list or something. I'll, have a very intentional kind of audit of my time in very small increments and see what those blockers are. And for me, a lot, because again, I was bootstrapping and like really kind of scared to spend, and ultimately getting to loosening that grasp a bit and just understanding like what is the best use of my time and what is it really just worth it to like bring someone on or get a service for or outsource, and ultimately free up my time. If I can be focusing my time on the areas that are my strengths and like growing the pie, then like that extra $1,000 a month to outsource that. So really kind of being intentional about not just bandwidth overall, but the specific tasks I'm still keeping on my plate versus delegating, and doing kind of either like Pomodoro method or like real kind of tight time blocks to understand what's getting in the way.
Sounds like you've got a lot of strategies. That's really awesome.
Well, and
I try.
the Pomodoro technique, remind me that's spending a certain amount of time, and then when that certain amount of time is up, you have to go do something else, right? Or stand up or get a drink of water.
Exactly. Trying to do like deep work, like one. It's funny because I always kind of like prided myself on being a multitasker, and I've also changed my tune where I'm like, I don't think like I'm going to attempt to be the best unitasker at this one thing and usually I think it's 20 minutes. I have like a physical, like a kitchen timer.
Yes.
And so you do 20 minutes and then you have to do at least 5, like off, change, walk, whatever. Even like email, my team makes fun. They're like, oh, it's Kaylin's email hour. Cause I'm like, everything comes through at the same time. But the idea that like, the emails that come in are never like my priorities or my to-do list. It's everyone else's. So limiting when I allow that. Mm-hmm.
Right. All right. So in our research, we read that Jiggy grew 550% during COVID. And during COVID is, who knows what that means, but 550% over any short stretch of time, that's fantastic. Right. So it seems like you really timed it just right or just rode the wave just perfectly. And now that people are like allowed to leave their homes again, what's your strategy to keep the momentum going? And how can other founders navigate success that happens through circumstances out of their control?
Right. I mean, it's the timing ended up, again, I was thinking about it for years, and then November 2019 actually launched. So it was just one of those things. And then, it was really double-edged because it brought incredible demand and attention for a product like ours, but also brought all of these constraints and supply chain issues and all that. So really tried to view this window of opportunity and interest, to one, just like bring people into our fold and kind of view it as like, here is a lead gen circumstance. So how do we, get you signed up for email or SMS, and how do we keep providing not just kind of here's our product, buy it, but engaging content. That's where a lot of kind of community stuff and telling our artist stories comes in. So a lot of focus on that organic kind of social email content and dialogue we have with the community. One thing about puzzles we found, which I certainly found and kind of led was that origin story, is that they're addicting. And it was habitual and became kind of my nightly unwind practice. And so once we saw that behavior also starting with our customers, we kind of leaned in and tried to formalize that into a product offering, which is our puzzle club. So it's a monthly membership, and we curate the art, and it's a different artist, and you get a studio tour and behind the scenes with the artist, and then you receive their puzzle every month. And then, you know, I think really that's kind of on the customer side. And then some of the new, uses of puzzles, which we kind of have this whole deck for our partners. We call it like puzzles as a platform. And really, how do we use puzzles as a vehicle for a moment, a brand, you know, a brand launch, a product launch, or employee gifting, especially when everyone's remote and stuck at home. You know, how do you kind of surprise and delight your employees or customers, or VIPs with a branded puzzle? And so opening up that, you know, understanding that B2C, we're going to continue to, you know, cultivate that community and have this subscription and really create that ritual and habit around puzzles that will continue the demand. But, you know, everyone's allowed outside. You know, there is some natural seasonality like summer when you're doing outdoor activities. So how do we also kind of buffer that and build the B2B business to kind of even out some of that seasonality or loss in demand? So working a lot on the custom side, our big wholesale and retail partners, and again, using puzzles as kind of a different angle. We just, one example, we just worked with the music artist Casey Musgraves. She launched her album, and so we put her, I love her too. I was totally fangirling, but we put her, you know, her new cover album art on a puzzle, and that was, you know, sold alongside the album release, kind of a different way to engage fans. We've talked with a couple other partners and with a similar kind of type structure of the partnership. And there's something about putting a puzzle together that, you know, is very very ripe for like surprise and delight, kind of Easter egg. We're talking with one partner about including like a QR code, kind of Willy Wonka ticket, win the tour tickets. So I think there are a lot of fun ways that we want to show. And I was talking to an advertising guy, and he was like, wait, hold on. Like, I spend $5 million on 30 seconds of attention, and you're telling me someone's going to spend 8 hours with this thing and I can put my logo on it? Like, so, you know, really kind of building out that revenue stream to support the business overall, while we, you know, definitely still continue to invest on the direct to consumer side.
Yeah. I don't know if y'all could hear this, but when you said Casey Musgraves, I'm pretty sure I heard our producer Michaela like squealing in the background.
Oh my God.
So
all of our pre-podcast meetings were filled with, oh my gosh, she did the Musgraves thing. And I'm like, what? I don't understand.
Yeah. Ethan's over here like, what?
Everybody gets it but me, and that's okay.
Yeah. And Ethan and I have had multiple conversations about brands and companies building out that personal touch with their consumers, and hearing more about that and the lengths you're going to include consumers in this community of, you know, doing a jigsaw puzzle might be you at your kitchen table by yourself and building that community around like, hey, we all like to do this. That's brilliant, and I love it.
Thank you.
And you've been featured in a ton of publications. Is this part of your marketing strategy, or do you just like us that much?
No, it definitely is. And I think the publications you mentioned, like I see just two pronged. One is just, you know, we're an e-com, we have a product to sell. So gift guides, you know, kind of the quick hits, different roundups, gift guide products, lists, things like that. But really the opportunity to share more about what we're about. And, you know, sometimes on those lists, like, oh, you're pretty puzzle, pretty packaging, cool, but can miss a lot of like our artists and what we're trying to do and what we stand for and how the people behind it. So so I really appreciate the opportunity to share that side of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any advice for anyone that wants to reach a wider audience through media and maybe might be a little shy?
I mean, for shyness, so how to reach them, I think being super clear on just your why and what you're doing, how is it bigger than you, and how to make that resonate with people. And I think, shyness, like of course, if it's yours and you have to be the one speaking it, like ultimately, it is your voice and face. But if almost getting behind the brand and mission is more comfortable, I think that can be equally as powerful, to just lead with that and make sure that, I think people, like, it's much easier to negotiate on someone else's behalf, right, than your own. So kind of the similar approach of like, you are a steward of this message, if you will. And so kind of lead with that.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know me, I am incredibly introverted, and I will say that practice helps, but I can't imagine being on everything you've been on and being like, yeah, this is fine. I would be so scared.
Oh, you didn't get the memo? We're going on the cover of Podcast Weekly. Just kidding.
Yeah,
If Podcast Weekly, if you're a real thing, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So, drop a line. All right. So you've got direct-to-consumer store on your website, but Jiggy Puzzles can also be found in retail stores. Obviously, there's an advantage to being in multiple places, but what's the kind of the thought on I should do one versus the other? I should do both. How did you come up to that?
I had been thinking about whether, I felt like in the beginning it was binary, like retail, yes or no. And I'm from the onset and still most excited and passionate about the direct to consumer and building our own community and audience and all of the things I've mentioned thus far, and really having the brand be centered around that. But one, I saw kind of the things that convinced me to do retail were, one, seeing some of the behavior of our customers, and that, gifting, for example, we'd get emails like, I want to bring this to a housewarming. It's tonight. Like, where can I find you in the next 30 minutes? So having accessibility in key markets, with shelf space, and two, to kind of, as I mentioned before, like the positioning of the product. So decided to do retail, but wanted to be specific about which partners. So the first one we went with was Anthropologie. Since then, we've been in Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale's, and some kind of elevated gift boutiques. And so the whole positioning of the brand and our product, again, kind of away from toy game and into home, gift, lifestyle, decor, art, kind of having the retail partners we chose, like, lend their brand name to help that positioning and make that case. And so have chosen to kind of use the partners wisely in that way, and then direct our customers. We want them to still be our jiggypuzzle.com customers, but if they need to pick something up quickly or touch and feel and see the designs in person, sometimes it's hard, especially with the materials we use, the glass and, the thickness of our cardstock and all of that. It's hard to communicate that through photography or through our product pages. So I think now very much see them as means to the same goal. It's just kind of a different experience we can provide.
Gotcha. So you mentioned your first partnership, your first retail partnership was with Anthropologie.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us the story about how you went from no partnerships to getting that first partnership with Anthropologie?
Yeah, it was right before COVID, so I was able to go in person, but I had done some just cold outreach when I was thinking about so I knew that, Urban Outfitters, Anthropologie, Free People, Beholden were the same parent brand. And actually some friends have been like, this feels like it might, like, the urban, like, kind of miscellaneous table. Like, I feel like there are puzzles there. I thought Anthropologie was a good brand fit for us and kind of our demographic, and that I knew during Q4, they really leaned more into gifts and home than apparel. So I had been doing some outreach, and then I think when she first reached out, she actually had found me on Instagram separately. So it wasn't my email that did it, but that one of the buyers saw us on Instagram and reached out, and I packed my car up. They're based in Philadelphia, and so not a far drive from New York City. So packed up some samples and drove to Philly and went to their headquarters. And, we really just kind of talked through like who the shopper is, who our Jiggy puzzler is, and what really connected, I think, with them is that they felt like the Anthropologie woman is like both wants form and function. So like she wants something practical. She wants the use of it, but expects it to, be curated and elevated and look Instagrammable in her home. And, so we felt it was just super aligned. They already had a bunch of like artist residence programs and do a lot of support of emerging artists. And so they had in-house artists already that they wanted to use the work of. So we curated 7 designs together for our Jiggy Anthropologie collaboration. And then launched those, timed that for the holiday season. So launched those October of that first year. It was definitely not seamless. I got ahead of my skis a little bit. I went from, I was still one woman show, mind you. And, it was like tens of thousands of units, which was like more than we had sold on our own already. And very specific, the whole wholesale guidelines of, how things need to be labeled and the master cartons and how they need to be delivered and all that. It was just, very technical, which I did not have expertise in, but, again, one of those you figure it out, one foot in front of the other. And yeah, being 1 year in, well, we launched in October 2020, so less than a year in, and seeing a national rollout in all domestic Anthropologie stores was just a really kind of surreal, special moment.
An Anthropologie is an experience. I feel like like everyone who's been in one knows what they look like,
Yeah.
And like speaking of Instagram, how did you leverage your social media following, or really get your social media going to where it was impacting your business?
Yeah, I started the Instagram pre-launch. I was like, all right, so the product's being made right now. It takes a minute. Then we have to ship it. It takes a minute. So like, what can I do in the meantime? So I started collecting emails and threw up like a landing page with a wait list, and then started the social accounts. So for a few months before launch, posted kind of puzzle tangential content, I would say, and just art, not the specific designs we were launching with, but some just kind of discovery of new art. And so that was helpful even just for launch day. And then once we launched, it's one of those things that I feel very particular about. Anything that's kind of customer facing voice and personality of the brand. So all email, social, SMS, like I still write every word of for the most part. And it's definitely not scalable, but it's still just one of those things that I feel very strongly about. So, now that we have, I don't know, we're like 70,000 followers, it definitely has become a channel that both is great for just discovery and visibility, and people share and find us that way. But it's also become like a two-way, a dialogue. So people, DM or comment all the time, different ideas, send us different artists that they would want to see. Will you do kids puzzles? Will you do, for example, frames was something that came from that, because, they'd finish their puzzle and then reach out and be like, all right, like what size, what thickness, what do I need to do? So we actually just launched our own JIGGY frames. So it's a pairing for each design. And so, now see our social as kind of one spoke of our community hub, where we get a lot of insight and learn, and then email as well. So I think, it really depends on your brand, and content creation and keeping up with like the best practices of cadence and everything that you need to do to really have it be like a tentpole of the brand takes a ton of work. And especially if you're like an aesthetically driven brand, which we are, between the photography of the product and the art, want that to be visually captured. It's definitely a big lift, but I think ultimately worth it. And I can't tell you how many times we just anecdotally hear that's how people found us, or, bought one puzzle and now have been following for 2 years and not bought another, but feel a connection to the brand through it.
Yeah. And you said something that like piqued my interest as a branding kind of person, but your brand voice and personality. In my experience, a lot of people skip that part. But how did you really define that and narrow it down? Y'all are a very aesthetic brand. You're very aesthetics driven. How did you define that voice when you started out?
Yeah, that's been another exercise now with building out a team of, for a long time, I didn't have to, because it was mine basically. Like I didn't really have to like meta, like explain it. It was just like very natural. But, we did the same exercise at theSkimm, which was fascinating because that was the entire product, right? Like the voice of the newsletter, was crucial, and how to scale that, how to hire an editorial team that, as a reader, it would be seamless and you couldn't even tell who wrote it one day to the next. So saw that firsthand, and got a lot of good insight there of how to kind of formalize a voice into a guide and something, a playbook that could be passed off to someone. I try to walk kind of a fine balance, and even with the name. So I think that was probably in the beginning the catalyst to really kind of articulate the brand, because it's like, all right, I want it to tie to puzzles. I want it to make sense and be related, and puzzle, jigsaw, something, and I want it to be, kind of not necessarily minimalist, but like short and sweet and to the point, and not too much like pomp and circumstance, but also I want it to be playful. Like I'm approaching this in an elevated way, but like at the end of the day, it's a puzzle. Like I want it to have some fun and playfulness. And so going through that exercise to, you know, have Google Docs of potential names and ultimately get to Jiggy. That was kind of the first step.
All I can think about is that Will Smith song. So it's been in my head this entire interview. So
oh yeah,
there's always one Jiggy pun, and
you gotta have puns. I mean, come on.
Right. Yeah,
Sorry,
you went a different direction on that than I did. You know, you said you wanted short and sweet, and I was like, Saw, you know, Jigsaw. But I think that's already taken. They talk about, you know, they say, I want to play a game. But, you know,
yeah.
Maybe not the same kind of game. So.
Oh my God.
That would have stood out in the market for sure.
All right. So something.
Yeah, your
that
turn.
heard,
I can't hold it together.
something that we've heard from every one of our founders so far is that entrepreneurship is hard. It's just, it's hard. I mean, there's no way to get around it. So what was something that surprised you when you jumped in, when you launched your startup? Was there something that was just like so much harder than you thought it was going to be? Or even the opposite? Was there something that was like, you were thinking it was going to be super hard and it was just like way easier than you thought it was going to be?
I think the things that I thought might have been hard that ended up not are just the things that like seem, if you've never done it before, seem like confusing, or just all the infrastructure, like incorporating and setting up and, you know, becoming compliance and all of like the kind of hard business ops side. And so that was kind of a pleasant surprise of just, there's so many materials out there and just like checklists. I'm like, I don't like, you know, with a physical product, like we have glass, someone's going to cut themselves and sue us. And like, how do I, you know, just all of those things that can seem quite overwhelming. And, you know, between just like, you got like checklists. What do you need to do? What do you need to know? What, you know, disclaimers, business insurance, stuff like that. There's just so many materials and you know, experts that will lend themselves. So that has actually not been as much of a hindrance as I might have thought. The things that have truly been hard, I think, you know, like the in the weeds stuff of just deciding like policies around some, you know, customer service issues. How do you balancing like being a small business and having to have, you know, the unit economics make sense, but then also just be generous with like customer service issues or lost packages and reshipping and you know, some of the things that are just like the cost of doing business, and defining what your approach and policies are, has like actually been a bit less straightforward than I would have thought. Again, some of just the manufacturing and freight, especially in the COVID world. I think for the first time ever, like every international shipping container was booked at one point in time.
Wow.
So things that I guess this, like to sum it up, like some things that you have no control over, especially as a like very kind of type A, like I've done hard things before, but they were always within my control. Like in school, okay, I have my thesis due. Like I will pull all-nighters. I will do whatever it has, you know, to be told like your product's at the port and it can't get off the boat for 2 weeks. And so your customers are now angry and you're going to need to refund everyone for the holidays. And so you're going to lose money and there's nothing you can do. And I'm like,
oh my God,
I don't like bribe someone at Port Authority. Like, what do you mean there's nothing to do?
Right.
Like, that's so hard to accept.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm like, swim, go to the boat. Like, I don't know, figure it
Get
out.
a dinghy.
And so,
yeah.
yeah. So honestly, some of the hardest moments have just been around like the lack of control, and then the downstream, like disappointing customers and like, you know, missing a moment or a sales window or holidays or something. And just kind of having to be okay with that or figure out plan B, C, D, E. Yeah, that's been hard.
Yeah. And then plan B, don't mess up plan A. Like, please.
Yes.
I would have a hard time. Like, I'm kind of I like all my control in one little, please don't take that from me. So I would really struggle as well. In some of our previous conversations and previous digging, there was a story about blank puzzles going out, and I would love to know more because it sounds like it turned out really well.
Yes, it was one of those what's that saying I love? Necessity is the mother of invention moments. When we launched in November 2019, I'd gotten our first production run. We were selling through them, and then March 2020, stay-at-home orders, quarantine, everyone's looking for activity, stuck at home. So the remainder of our inventory, which I thought was going to last months, sold out in a couple weeks. So April 2020, we're sold out. I rushed back into production, reorder everything, but it's going to be a couple months until it arrives. So we had this period when it's like, all right, I'm a 4-month-old company. How do I stay relevant when I have nothing to sell people? And so, first we did gift cards, and we did digital gift cards, and then we got these really cute mini puzzle gift cards. They're 24 pieces, and you put them together and it reveals your redemption code. And then kind of this idea came out of both, what we were hearing from our artist community. So while this all was happening, we were having conversations with our artists about how they were doing and were they okay. And a lot of their galleries were closed or exhibits were canceled. And so they were in a tough spot and didn't have, there weren't a ton of commissions of original art in the early days of COVID with such uncertainty. So the idea came to me to use them in their free time to create, to get the only thing our factory could provide were blank white puzzles. So the pieces were cut. There was just nothing printed on them. Right. And so we got those, we distributed them to our artists, and they hand painted and hand drew directly on to these puzzles. So created, a real one of a kind, original puzzle. And then we hosted an auction of them. So it was a JIGGY Originals puzzle art auction, and we shared the proceeds between the artist herself and New York City COVID fundraising efforts. And so that ended up being a really kind of special moment for the brand, for our relationship with these artists, and for our community who, participated in the auction. So it definitely kind of was that adaptability, quotient idea of how to use what you have. And I think that's why having a why is so important, and having a mission, because that was really, our support of artists and having them be so integral to the brand is really where that came from, and wouldn't have been possible without them.
Yeah. You ended up with a very personal touch in there, and like, what an experience for people that do own those puzzles now. It's very cool. Exactly. I'm really glad we got to talk about that story.
Thanks.
And how do you deal with imposter syndrome? And do you have any advice for entrepreneurs working through that?
Yeah, I definitely have it, deal with it. And I think the more you grow, kind of the bigger kind of conversations you're, talking to like Casey Musgraves, managers, and like I feel like on the one hand, the more experience you have or the bigger your brand gets, like maybe the less you should have it because you did this thing and you have this big brand, but then you're also like hopefully leveling up and talking, in bigger conversations, in bigger rooms. So, I think it's kind of back to that SKIM, like the demystifying, the more that I just hear and see and network and talk to friends and other founders, and like really just the shared experiences and really hearing and seeing that everyone at least feels like they're winging it. And to have that kind of be an open conversation and more normalized, really, really helps. And ultimately, I think, I heard someone recently kind of trying to reframe imposter syndrome of like, it's not a bad thing. Like, it's actually a good, like, we should embrace it because, like, hopefully that means you are stretching your comfort zone and, like, you are, leveling up. And so rather than, I think seeing it, someone's like, seeing fear or imposter syndrome as an obstacle, like seeing is actually like a good sign that like you're on the right track.
Yeah. Oh, that's heartening for me.
All right, this has been a really great show. I've really enjoyed having you on. One more question and then we'll wrap up. How can our listeners support Jiggy? And is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah. So supporting Jiggy can look like following us, engaging with us, sending us artists you love. So we're Jiggy Puzzles everywhere on the internet, Instagram, website, Facebook, and of course, like take a look, check out our puzzles. If you're looking for something to unwind or have a puzzle lover in your life to gift to, that would mean the world to us. Other things I'd like to share, keep eyes peeled for some things we have ahead. As I mentioned, we're always listening and talking to our community about ideas. So the frames that I mentioned was a new thing. And then in the coming months, we have both that art voting contest. The winners of that are our next collection, which are launching in the spring. Some fun, big collaborations, similar to our Casey Musgraves, and then kids puzzles as well, which I'm really excited about, with some incredible illustrative artists for 100-piece kid sizes.
Man, so many fun things to look forward to. We will put links to social channels and any other fun stuff in the show notes. And Kaylin, thank you so much for joining us today. That is, unfortunately, though, a wrap for this episode of the Startup Savants podcast. We made it. We want to thank you, listener, for hanging out with us today. Do you want to chime in? If you think we're doing a good job, let us know in the comments over at startupsavant.com/podcast. If you think we are awful, let us know in the comments over at startupsavant.com/podcast. Ethan reads the bad ones, I read the good ones. If you really loved the show, head over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcatcher and leave us a 5-star review. For tools, guides, videos, startup stories, and so much more, head over to truic.com. That's truic.com, TRUIC.com. See you, folks.
Peace.